Okay, okay.
Gabriella, can you hear us? So it looks like Gabriella has joined, but it doesn't have audio yet.
Make sure you unmute yourself when you speak by clicking the microphone at the top of the screen.
And I just added to the chat box, please let us know if you can hear us or if there's anything in terms of technical questions that we can help with on our end. We want everybody to be able to really participate. Jose, we would love to connect with you after this as well. And Ariel will explain, but we're really hoping to help connect youth advocates to be even more impactful together across the Global Campaign for Education movement. So Gabriella says she can't hear anything. Ariel, what we can do is, yeah, thank you. Gabriella can also call in depending on her country. And we can send her the dial-in number. It sounds like sound just came on for Taylor, and Gabriella's working on it. Taylor, welcome. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're a little faint, but we're glad you're on the line. And I think Gabriella is working on her sound. We'll just give it a couple of minutes as people are joining and getting set up, and then we'll get started. We're really delighted to welcome all of you. Thanks, Taylor. We see most people have already figured out how to mute when you're not speaking. That's fine, but just make sure that you use the chat box, share your ideas with us. We also are happy to hear from you with whatever format you'd like, chatting or coming on audio as well. Gabriella, can we help? Are you able to hear us now? Okay, we just got a note that Gabriella can hear us, so that's wonderful. We'll just give it a few moments. And Taylor, thanks for confirming that you'll mostly be using the chat box. That's fine. Is everybody able to see the screen all right? You should see a screen that says Global Campaign for Education US Youth Advocacy Webinar. Okay, thank you, everybody. We know how busy everybody is, and you're joining across time zones in some cases, so maybe we should go ahead and get started.
That sounds great, Jennifer. Let's go ahead and get started. So I'll start by welcoming everyone. Thank you to all of our youth advocacy leaders who are here, and thank you to all of our other participants and global education champions who are here. So whether you are a youth advocate leader in the program or whether you are just a global education champion, we want you to take the skills that you learn from this webinar into your community and use that to advocate for global education. So this is the first webinar in a series of webinars that will teach you basic advocacy skills and empower you to take action in your community to promote global education. So thank you all for coming. So we'll start with some basic introductions and background about the Global Campaign for Education. Then we'll do an overview of global education facts. And then Jennifer Rigg, who is our Executive Director at Global Campaign for Education US, will talk about education in Cambodia and her time there. Then we'll wrap up with how you can make a difference and build advocacy into your career and life. So why don't we go ahead and continue?
Great. So thank you so much, Ariel. Ariel leads our youth engagement and communications work here at the Global Campaign for Education US. This is Jennifer. I just want to pause because it looks like we have a wireless caller who has joined. If you can hear us but are having any difficulty, feel free to let us know in the chat box. We do want to help make sure everybody can hear and participate. Welcome to those who have just joined. We have several dialing in. We're going to get started with introductions. If you could please type into the chat box, let us know if you can't access the chat box, and we'll set up another way. Your name, where are you from, and even briefly, it could just be one word, what does education mean to you? And if you could, make sure to mute your line when you're not talking so we can hear each other. That would be great. So we're introducing ourselves, our name, where are you from, and what does education mean to you? Please go ahead and use the chat box if you can, or let us know if that's not working on your end.
And while you're introducing yourselves, we'll go ahead and introduce ourselves as well. So as many of you know, my name is Ariel, and I'm the Youth Engagement and Communications Associate at GCE-US. I'm from Maryland, and what education means to me is that every child and young person has a human right to go to school in a safe environment and receive quality instruction. And that's why I feel passionate about the mission of GCE-US.
And I'm Jessie Diamond. I'm also here with the Global Campaign for Education US. I am our Policy and Coalition Associate, so I lead a lot of our policy work, and we'll be happy to continue to coordinate with you all in the future about that. I am from Washington, D.C., and what education means to me is an opportunity to move forward in life and choose the path that you want. I was lucky to be able to have access to a quality education. It helped me go to college. It helped me launch the career that I have today. And I want to work to make sure that all children, regardless of the barriers that they face in life, have access to that same right.
Thank you, Jessie.
This is terrific.
And we have a lot of people. We have Ellie joining us from Richmond, and we have Taylor joining us from New York City, Joey from the Philippines, and we have Gabriella. She's in Central Florida. So we have advocates and champions all over the world. So we are so happy to have all of you joining us. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. It's Jennifer Rigg here. I'm happy to introduce as well. I serve as the Executive Director at the Global Campaign for Education US, and I was raised originally in Ann Arbor, Michigan in the United States. Education means all the things that people have already mentioned to me, but I'll also mention I have 2 young children, so I see them struggling in real time, but also seeing the amazing doors that education can open. So education really, to me, unlocks equality, helps break the cycle of poverty, and it really helps lead to equal opportunity when we're able to really ensure that all are able to access quality education. So we're really excited that you're all joining us. For those of you who haven't been able to introduce yourself, please let us know if you're having any technical difficulties or if we can help in any way. And you're welcome to email your information to info@gce-us.org if that's easier, or to let us know and we can unmute your line so we can hear from you on audio. And we would love to continue to get to know you. We're so excited that you all are joining today. If you haven't introduced yet, please go ahead and continue to share your information on the chat box or on email. Thank you so much. So the Global Campaign for Education US, which we sometimes refer to as GCE-US for short, is a coalition of over 80 different nonprofit charity organizations, big and small, working to ensure that all children and youth around the world have access to quality education. We were founded in 2003, and we're part of a broader global movement. Our colleagues in the Philippines maybe have interacted with some of our GCE international colleagues. GCE globally is a social movement active in over 100 countries. We have a small secretariat or hub of staff in Johannesburg, South Africa, and we're a proud member here at GCE-US of the broader Global Campaign for Education. We really want this to be a social movement that is youth-led, and so all of you are really, really critical for that and for helping to make sure that we're advocating collectively for building stronger public education systems. We're doing so in ways that really build on your experience as students, as young people, as leaders. And we also find that the work that we do in coalition is very powerful and impactful. So for example, here at GCE-US, we were initially housed at the Council on Foreign Relations, and when we were founded in 2003 by Gene Sperling. And then we became an independent charity nonprofit organization in 2014. Today we represent thousands of people that are active across our different coalition members and constituencies, and that includes community-based organizations, international organizations, teachers unions, youth organizations, faith-based groups, think tanks, you name it. And we really focus on our core mission of promoting education as a basic human right and mobilizing to create the political will in the United States and internationally to ensure quality education, and not just education for education's sake, but because we know education is really at the core of all human development and can really unlock economic opportunity, greater global stability, and so many other things that we'll talk about in just a moment. You can learn more about us online, and we're happy to explain as well, answer any questions you might have about how we operate. We are a small team of 3 staff, Jesse, Ariel, and Jennifer, so you have all 3 of us right now, but we represent the power across this coalition of many organizations and advocates. And some of the things that we're excited about this week, for example, in Washington, D.C., is that even in a tough environment, we've been able to defend funding for U.S. leadership and involvement to help and partner with countries and communities around the world on international education. And we didn't think it was possible, but we just a few days ago, were able to actually keep the level of $800 million per fiscal year from the U.S. government for education projects and programs and support at that level, and increase the amount for the Global Partnership for Education, which is an exciting global multilateral or partnership initiative to really work in partnership with communities and countries around the globe. And it's really hard to create that type of environment, but there's such strong bipartisan support for this issue. People understand how critical it is, and your work to advocate with your policymakers, with your members of Congress, is so critical right now, so that we can make sure that we not only defend and help keep the progress underway that we've been able to create, but also that we really dream big and create even more impactful progress in the years to come. Here's a list of some of our coalition members. You can find all of them on our website as well at GCE-US.org. You can see that they really do represent civil society organizations or nonprofit charity organizations that are big and small. We all have similar missions to advance global education and work together to promote education, policy change, and the human right to quality education. We also find that we're able to share information with each other, help each other to reach policymakers more strategically, communicate about critical issues including girls' education, gender disparities, equality, disability inclusive education, etc. So that's just a little bit about who we are. And we wanted to also share a little bit about kind of education writ large. The coalition itself is really spearheaded by Jesse Diamond on our team. So I want to just pause to Jesse, is there anything that you'd like to share to add about the coalition? And one thing that's really exciting is our youth leaders often might be familiar with some of these groups that are in our coalition, or maybe they are all new to you. But one thing that's unique about what we do is we help people learn how to work in coalition for greater impact together.
Sure, so I can speak a bit to my work with the coalition members. What is interesting about our coalition is it isn't just organizations doing one type of work. So we have a lot of organizations who are project implementers themselves, meaning they go into the countries and they implement those programs in developing countries to do with education, to promote education. We also have other organizations that work with us on advocacy. So they're advocacy partners as we communicate with members of Congress, as we work with the U.S. government. So it's really a wide range, but those that are working on programs serve a really specific purpose. They help us tell their stories when we go to Congress. Those who coordinate with us on advocacy also serve a purpose to help us build a stronger voice when we go to the Hill, when we go to the U.S. government. So that really is the purpose of the coalition, and it's the sort of work that we do in coordination with each other.
Great. Thank you so much, Jesse. So taking a step backwards and thinking a little bit about education as an issue, many of you might be familiar with this already, so we just wanted to give some fast facts, if you will, that arm us as advocates to help make the case for why education is so important to accelerate progress on and to really engage policymakers to prioritize this issue as well. So there are over 260 million children and youth out of school around the world today, despite the fact that the right to education was declared back in 1959 through the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of the Child. Some of the reasons for children and youth being out of school include, if you think about this different demographics, 90% of children and youth with disabilities in the developing world are out of school. Sometimes that means that they might not be counted at all. They might not have access to school. There are a variety of reasons why that might be happening. Disability inclusive education is an advocacy area that we very much want to do more work on. And if any of these issue areas are of interest to you all, or something that we're not talking about today is of interest to you, please do let us know. Girls and young women are 2.5 times more likely to be out of school than their counterparts who are boys and young men. And then another key factor is where somebody lives. So if they were born in an emergency setting or a crisis or conflict-affected environment, that constitutes 75 million children around the world affected by crisis in some shape or form are more than 2 times likely to be out of school. Now, we might think of that as a temporary arrangement, but the other statistic here that I think is so impactful is that when a family is displaced because of crisis or an conflict or an emergency, the average number of years that that family is then away from their homeland is 17. So 17 years, that's literally a whole generation, and that can lead to lost generations of children and youth who don't have access to quality, consistent education. So we really can't allow those 75 million children and youth that live in crisis-affected locations to not have access to quality education. On the flip side, when they do have access to quality education, regardless of where they were born or where they're located, then it can really unlock stability, it can unlock economic growth, and all sorts of fantastic things that really are critical, as well as helping to really build that psychosocial support that can help young children, especially through such crises. And poverty, of course, is so linked to all these issues. 69% of children in low-income countries currently are not learning basic primary skills. So that speaks to, if somebody's in a school setting, what is detracting from their human right to quality education, right? So not just physically being in a school setting in some shape or form, but also having access to materials for learning in the language that that person knows how to speak from home. in a mother tongue. For example, looking at the ratio of students to teachers, and looking at the curriculum, looking at, there are a variety of factors there that can then help to make sure that children and youth are also around the world, in all countries and communities, are able to learn skills that will support them throughout their life and throughout their careers and livelihoods. Let me just pause there. Are there any other facts or statistics that you all would like to feature? Feel free to add them to the chat box, and welcome. We're so delighted you all have joined us. The reason I wanted to here is I know many of you already have firsthand experience with education issues. This could be in your local community as well as globally or in any environment. Are there some facts, statistics, or key reasons that you'd like to share that help to speak to why you think education is important to advocate for? So while we're all thinking about that, we'll just take a quick look at some of the global education benefits. We know that education can really help with skill development, but also making informed decisions that have impact on health, economics, environmental issues, etc. We've talked a little bit about how education can really reduce and break the cycle of poverty, as well as boost national to local economies. There's also really fantastic research and evidence indicating that girls' and women's education, for example, improves not only maternal health, but also can reduce malnutrition for children and really have generational effects down the road. We see tremendous impact on education, increased education, decreasing incidences of HIV/AIDS, and ultimately helping to really create stronger stability across the globe and across communities and countries. So what I'd like to do now is help us to kind of hone in on a specific example. All of this sounds great, but how do we make this real, and what does this look like in a specific country context? And then we're going to think about together, how can we advocate for the best possible education for all children and youth around the world? So I was asked to share some background about a community where I've worked. I have been at the Global Campaign for Education-US for the last 3 years, Save the Children, and was previously around our coalition table for many years. And then before that, I was at CARE. When I worked for CARE, I was lucky to partner with our local office in Cambodia and was able to work there starting in 2001. So it was a long time ago, but what we wanted to share was sort of some of the history of how educational systems can be supported, strengthened, overcome challenges, and how we can our global advocacy can be helpful. So this slide provides a little bit of background on the crisis setting. The education system was relatively strong, actually, before the 1970s, but decimated during the war through the 1990s. Many schools were physically destroyed. Many teachers and educators, a whole generation of teachers and educators, unfortunately, were also killed. I came and had a chance to work with local partners as the school system was being revitalized, but it's helpful, I think, to recognize that in that setting, especially in rural environments, school wasn't necessarily a physical building. School might be held under a tree or in a building that was in the process of being built as a community center writ large. It really was about, where is the teacher, where are the students, how can we start providing school. So it might look different depending on where you are, but of course there are so many commonalities that bring us together across sort of our educational experience. Over the last decade, 1,000 new schools have been built, and there's a global standard as advocates to try to really make sure that each country is spending at least 20% of their overall national budget on education. It's not just about the money, obviously. It's also about the policies, the systems, helping to make sure that there's the support that's needed for students, teachers, and other players. But Cambodia today is at about 18% of its national budget being spent on education. There's still a ways to go. Historically, most boys were able to access a religiously focused educational opportunity, whereas girls were not necessarily able to. But today, there's near gender parity at the primary school level, the elementary school level. So 85% of boys and 83% of girls are currently attending primary school. However, as girls become young women, get older, there's a much higher dropout rate at the secondary level than boys. And some of the barriers there have to do with not only poverty, but also child labor. Many of the young women that I worked with and met really had to care for their younger siblings full-time or work, sometimes in unsafe conditions. So part of what we do as advocates at GCE-US is we work really closely with child labor advocates as well, hand in hand, so that we're improving options for children and their families, boosting their economic stability, decreasing child labor, and helping children sustainably stay in school. Safety concerns come up in terms of access to school. When I was there were still many landmines as a result of the war. And so people literally, after the rainy season, if they walked off a path that had been previously cleared of landmines, that might be enough to set off a landmine. And of course, that type of safety problem would be enough to stop somebody from going to school. The lack of sanitation in school. So if you can imagine, what would it be like to go to school and there's no toilet, there's no running water, and as young women get older, then there's also no option for menstrual hygiene management, and so that becomes a barrier, especially around age 11, 12 onward, where girls sometimes then stop going to school or might miss a substantial amount of school each month. And then unofficial school fees. So we really advocate for quality public education that's universally accessible, no matter how much money your family has, without those fees. And we do see this as a barrier in many countries as well, where there might be costs for books, school supplies, uniforms, backpacks, other things that a student might not be able to provide, that would then be a barrier to going and staying in school. However, when we're able to overcome those barriers and build even stronger systems and advocacy, the benefits of all children, but in this case especially thinking about girls' education, attending school, are huge. So each additional year of schooling, for example, globally for girls, can increase her income by 15%, which is, as we think about helping young women and young men stay in school, of course, has a huge impact. So we hope that was helpful to kind of think about the global as well as one national perspective. We would love through the webinars to share your experiences more with each other, and also which contexts and which issues you're most interested in learning about. So keep sending notes through the chat box or on email at info@gce-us.org. We absolutely want to hear from you. We're going to shift now that we've heard some of these fast facts and statistics to how can we advocate for education around the world? How can we really make a difference on these issues, thinking about both congressional and policymaker actions as well as community actions. And as we talk about some of these ideas, please keep in mind we want to hear from you about what's missing on this list. What else would you like to try, or have you seen work successfully in the past? This is just sort of a brainstorm and starter list, if you will, to get the ideas rolling. So Jesse's going to kick us off with congressional actions.
Sure, thanks so much, Jennifer. So I want to talk to all of you about engaging with your members of Congress. For those of you that are in U.S. congressional districts, these are really key actions. Some of you may already be doing this work, and that's fantastic. If you're not, or if you want to engage further, I really want to encourage you just to keep in close contact with your members of Congress on these issues. You can always meet with a member of Congress. It's great if you can come to D.C. It's great if you can meet them at Capitol Hill, but that's not the only way to meet with them. You can always meet them in their district office, and sometimes that's much more impactful because they're seeing their constituent on their home territory talking about a global issue that's of importance to them. That's really critical. It's something to always keep in mind. You can also write letters, email, call your members of Congress, and the key thing to remember about that is their staff read those correspondences. They really listen, they really track them, and they pass that information on to their boss. Constituent correspondence makes much more of a difference than any other type of advocacy. It's really crucial. So when you're thinking about contacting your member of Congress, there are a couple of strategies you can use. You can organize within your community to host a call-in day so that you're organizing a group of people from your community working together to put together call scripts, making calls together to your members of Congress. It's a good way to raise awareness about the issue and making sure that you're coordinating messages and contacting Congress on a larger scale. You can also use a technique that's called bird dogging. What that means is you go to a local town hall where your member of Congress is speaking and ask them a question about, in this case, global education, so that they have to, when they speak, when they answer that question, what they're doing is putting the information that they give you or their response to that question on the record. And you can then use the answer that they put on the record to engage them in the future. So that's a really important tactic to remember as well. A couple of other pieces to think about when you're reaching out to a member of Congress is do some background research, figure out what committees they're on, if there's legislation related to education that they've worked on, that they've co-sponsored. That is usually available on their website, but if you ever have questions about doing that background research, feel free to contact me. My email is on this slideshow, and I can always reach out to all of you directly. Happy to coordinate with you on learning more about your members of Congress and how you can best work with them.
Thank you, Jessie. Yes, and also another tip is to bring a tip sheet with you or a fact sheet, a one-page when you go and meet with your member of Congress. You might be meeting with the staffer, and that's fine, but having something that they can take back with them to their meetings, to their bosses, is really helpful as well. So to move on a bit and discuss community actions or grassroots organizing, a lot of the time so much of advocacy is just getting your issue heard and getting people involved and invested in what you're doing. So there are lots of ways to raise awareness in your community. So one way to reach a broad audience is to write an op-ed or a letter to the editor. And if any of you have experience writing op-eds or letters to the editor, please leave your comments in the chat box. But an op-ed is just basically means opposite of editorial. And it's just you making a case or stating your position on an issue supported by facts and submitting that opinion piece to a blog or to a newspaper. And this is a great way to reach different people that may not know about your issue otherwise. When you're doing an op-ed, it's really important to have clear goals. You want to state your goals and support them with facts, and you want to use one point, make one point. Use a hook to grab the reader's attention. That's just something about why they should care about your issue. If you're going to write an LTE, usually it's shorter, and you want to respond in a way that is going to either you're responding to something that an editor or maybe a politician has said. So you want to either respond in a way that's going to emphasize a point that you agree with, or if you disagree with the article, you want to use evidence to support that. So those are two ways that you can use print and basically reach a large sector of people that wouldn't otherwise know about your issue. Another really powerful and great way to engage in grassroots advocacy is to screen a film or to hold an awareness event. So do not underestimate the power of film. For an example, when I was in high school, I went to a screening of the film Hotel Rwanda, and then everyone was obviously very moved and became very emotional, and afterwards they had a petition at that time to get Congress and to get the world aware of the genocide that was occurring in Darfur. And they had people sign a petition, and then they gave it to their members of Congress. And people were so moved by that movie, by that film, that they took action. So a lot of the times when you use film and visuals, you're getting people invested emotionally. And when people are emotionally invested, they're more likely to take action. You could also hold an awareness event on campus or in your community. So for example, we had some of our youth advocacy leaders in the past create a Box Out the Barriers Day. And all that is looking up key facts, key statements that are going to grab people's attention about your issue. So you find key facts and statements about global education. You put them visually in a box along with pictures, kind of like an art display or a diorama if you want to go back to elementary school, and you display them around your campus or your community. So as people are walking, they see these beautiful boxes with these visuals, and they see the facts, and it's just a way to spread awareness, and it doesn't take any real effort on the part of people to look at a box. So it's a powerful way. It seems simple, but it's a powerful way to raise awareness. You could also create a photo petition. You could make posters with facts about your issue and have people take pictures of themselves holding the poster. And then you could take those pictures and either make a poster, or you can put them into a document on the computer and you can tweet them to your members of Congress, which takes us to our next advocacy tool, which is something that GCE-US does a lot: online organizing. You can do so much with online organizing. It's a great way to reach millions of people who may not even know about the issue. You can look in popular culture right now, you can look in the media and see how people have utilized social media to get issues heard. Look at the march that just happened in Washington, D.C. A lot of that happened because people were advocating and organizing online. So, for example, in February, GCE-US did a massive social media campaign with their coalition members to advocate for Global Partnership for Education replenishment. So just to get Congress aware of the need to support the GPE, we had created a social media toolkit. And a tip when you're doing online organizing is to do as much of the preparation work for your participants as possible. So we created a social media toolkit with tweets. We had key phrases in there. We had tagged all the people that we needed to tag. We had tagged members of Congress. We had tagged USAID, the United States Agency for International Development. And we had put in key hashtags and key phrases with links. And then all we did was put them in a document, send them out to our network, send them out to our coalition members, send them out to our donors, our constituents. And when you have a whole mass of people tweeting the same messages with the same key points to members of Congress over and over again, believe me, they're going to take notice. In fact, Twitter is a really effective way to reach your members of Congress because they have staff members who are checking their tweets and their social media constantly. So it may seem like it's kind of a silly thing to do and like who's going to read my tweet in the first place, but it's a really powerful way to immediately reach your members of Congress. So I really just want you to understand that you can take action right now. A lot of people have mobile phones, they have computers, and it doesn't take that much action to just retweet a tweet. So that's a great way to get people involved.
Thank you so much, and we're having a wonderful chat right now about which types of social media platforms people like to use. Thank you so much to everybody who's already jumping in and sharing ideas. Taylor, I agree with you that Snapchat can be easier maybe because that's where people are, but possible to reach other allies that way, help to organize. In some cases, actually for girls' education, Michelle Obama, when she was First Lady, was using Snapchat quite a bit. So I think it is something that can be used also to reach policymakers. Gabriella, thanks for sharing that you've used it to advertise for fundraising and advocacy events. That's great. I love how much work you all are already doing and the ideas that you're bringing from things that you've seen work well or not. That's fine too, to learn from what we think might not be as effective and share lessons with each other. Anything else that people would like to add on some of these possibilities around congressional actions, community actions? Our ultimate goal here is to help provide information, resources, the platform for you all to share ideas with each other, for making sure that you're able to connect with your members of Congress if you're in the U.S., your policymakers if you're outside the U.S., whatever that might look like depending on your political system in your country, and then also to really help to cultivate those relationships, build that relationship with your, in this country, senators and member of the House of Representatives. Really then, we'll talk about this in more depth through this series, and we absolutely want to hear from you all about which topics you would find most helpful. But these are some examples of things you can do, and we have easy actions you can already take on our website to, within 2 minutes, contact your member of Congress about the importance of global education, for example, or to thank them for passing a piece of legislation called the READ Act, which we've advocated on for a decade, and just passed last September on International Literacy Day. So there are lots of easy things you can do that are virtual, as well as meeting in person with and requesting those in-district meetings and the meetings in the Capitol. Thank you, Jose, for adding that Twitter can be really good for short advocacy messaging. So it really does depend. It sounds like maybe we should do something focused just on social media activism, perhaps, and you know, sharing. There are lots of great experts on this, but you all are doing this in real time and are indeed the experts. So thank you. This is really exciting to start to share some of these ideas. We also heard that those screenings of a film or whatnot can help people start to have their hearts and minds affected, if you will, and to start to have that personal story. And so Ariel's sharing that there are some free videos online that can make that easy. We also do have a lending library, so for people across the U.S., if you wanted to borrow our He Named Me Malala videos from we work in partnership with Malala Fund and others. We also have activities that can be helpful for working with all types of different groups to make that easy as well. And many of our partners have found that those types of events can really help to kick off a group of advocates in your community, on your campus, and get people very excited and involved. So we're going to move forward from here. Love all the ideas and enthusiasm, so keep the comments coming. We heard that people would love to really also think about, well, this advocacy that we're doing is so important for making the world a better place. What if I want to do advocacy not just as a volunteer? How can I really build advocacy into my life and into my career? And how can I get further involved? So we ran a pilot project where over 100 youth advocates came together over the course of 3 years, and we were delighted to be able to stay in touch with them. Many of them are now on our board of directors, actually helping to lead our organization. And what we found was, even after interaction and advocacy training, sharing of information with each other, being active within their local communities, and then going to Washington, D.C., going to their capital to meet and stay in touch on an ongoing basis with their policymakers, even if it was a short period of time, we were thrilled to hear that many of those participants said that the skills they gained helped them to get jobs, helped them to decide and move forward with graduate school, future educational goals of their own, and ultimately the vast majority of them said that they use those skills in their daily jobs now. So we'd like to make that even easier for you all. Many of you are already doing this. So again, same thing, please keep the ideas flowing in the chat box. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this and how can advocacy skills be helpful, be relevant with as you also are building your careers. So in the U.S. we have a couple of options. There are really great service programs, Peace Corps for global service, AmeriCorps for domestic service, AmeriCorps Vista, which Ariel and I both did, which is a year of service where you can actually do advocacy full-time in some cases, or help to build community organizations in different ways. So those service options, big and small, they might be on your campus through Alternative Spring Break. They might be through a volunteer office. It might be through an internship or a service learning project. There are lots of great ways to do that. I found, for example, that I grew up in a social activist family that was really active on especially women's rights and civil rights issues, as well as this student and cooperative movements. So I was protesting before I could walk, but what I found was that I was then drawn to wanting to learn, how do we make our advocacy as effective as possible? How do we do it throughout, advocate for issues that we care about across our life cycle, if you will, and across our career, without burning out? How do we help improve this field of advocacy, right, and support each other? And so I love working at GCE-US because that's exactly what we do. I started volunteering when I was pretty young because I kind of grew up in that environment. But then what I found was there were issues of policy change that I wanted to get more involved with, not just protesting and marching. So I got involved with, in high school, for example, a group called Children for Children, and we led bake sales, we raised money, we researched groups from the local to the global that we would then send our proceeds to. And doing that research, I actually learned a lot about organizations that I later went on to work with in my career. So it helped me build connections and figure out which groups I really wanted to work with the most. And then we also did local activism when there were issues for families that were experiencing homelessness. We volunteered in a family shelter, and we provided early learning support and care for the young children in particular who didn't have access to preschool, and allowed their parents to be able to work on finding housing and jobs as well. So that type of early exposure taught me that there was a lot we could do to make a difference, both in direct service but then also advocacy, because we paired that with creating change at the local, state, and national level on those issues. And then I was lucky to be able to work at a school with children both with and without disabilities, so who learned in lots of different ways when I was 12 onward. And so I learned early on how important disability inclusive education really is, and that kind of gave me the fire in my belly, if you will, for making sure that we really reach everybody, that when we talk about that over 260 million children and youth around the world who are still not in school, it helped me see that we can include everybody. There are challenges, but we absolutely must figure out how we're going to do so. In college, one thing I wanted to share that I have found a lot of times when hiring people is that somebody might be fresh out of college and say, oh, I don't have any experience. Well, the good news is in the advocacy and nonprofit sectors, everything you did as a volunteer, everything you do in running extracurricular clubs or organizations absolutely counts. And so I'm happy to answer any further questions about that, but just wanted to kind of, share a few quick ideas about ways that you can build your social network to engage allies, and then any skills that you're building through this webinar series, through advocacy that you're doing, you can absolutely highlight on your resume. And we have a wonderful board president who's an executive coach and has kindly offered that any of you that are interested, she can help provide that coaching to help you with that, and I'm happy to do the same. So we have a quick question. Is there a fellowship on global education in the U.S. and other countries? And the Hess Fellowship, we can send more information about that. And also, if any of you hear of similar fellowship opportunities, please do share. And then we want to hear from you all. What advocacy have you already done? You've shared some of that. What would you like to do? And I'm going to pass it over to Ariel to talk about some of the upcoming opportunities and things that we have on the docket for the next few weeks to months.
Okay, yes, so I won't take up too much time, but we have a webinar in April and another in May and hopefully one in June, so I'll be sending out more information about that. And we're having our Global Action Week for Education from April 22nd to the 28th. If you have any questions, you can contact me. But now I want to open it up to you all to see if you have any questions or comments. Please feel free to leave them in the chat box or to use your microphone. We can definitely send out more resources and information. We can send out information about the Hess Fellowship. We can also send out information about our website resources that have advocacy tips and fact sheets. And we can also send out information about our job coaching. So we can definitely do that. What other questions do we have? Okay, so Gabrielle's saying she's done some work with Girl Up, and she'd like to have a more active role in those type of groups. That's great. Great. And if anyone else has anything they'd like to share, please feel free to leave it in the chat box.
We are actively looking for people to help lead advocacy. So Gabriela, we'd be delighted to work with you.
Yes, we're very happy to have leaders in our advocacy group who have such great experience. So we've reached the end of the webinar, so I won't keep you all, but if you have questions, we'll be on for a couple minutes, and you can definitely email me. If Jennifer, we can go to the contact slide that we have up. Our emails are listed there, so feel free to reach out. Thank you so much for coming. I'll be following up with the leaders, and the rest of you, thank you so much for coming. Have a great evening.
And thank you, everybody. And yes, we would love to keep working together after the series. We want to hear from you all what you would find useful. So please keep those ideas coming. Do email us at info@gce-us.org or also through our individual emails and, of course, on social media. Thank you, everybody. We look forward to connecting very soon.